My name is Katie, I'm 16, and I live in a small town on the outskirts of Paris, France, a place where cobblestone streets twist like ribbons and tiny cafes spill the aroma of fresh croissants and roasted coffee into the crisp morning air. Life here moves slowly, serenely, almost as if the world itself is taking a deep, contented breath. From the outside, everything seems peaceful, picturesque even. But inside the music classroom at the little art school where I spend my afternoons, peace was about to shatter. I've had epilepsy since I was a child. For the past 3 months, the seizures had stayed away, leaving me with a fragile sense of hope, a quiet reassurance that perhaps my life could finally feel normal. I had begun to imagine afternoons like this one, soft sunlight streaming through tall windows, the gentle hum of a piano under my fingers, the faint scent of varnished wood and sheet music lingering in the air. But that day, with the substitute teacher, Mrs. Marianne Dubois, standing at the front of the room with her sharp eyes and brisk, precise movements, everything changed. Something in the way she conducted the lesson, the sudden stress in her tone, or maybe just the unseen currents of fate, triggered a storm inside me I thought I had left behind. In an instant, the calm of my small, orderly world dissolved, replaced by fear, confusion, and a sense that life as I knew it would never be the same again. If you're still listening, we want to sincerely thank you for spending your time with us. Truly means a lot. We'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments and let's see how far this message has reached. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, I highly recommend doing it now so you won't miss any of our upcoming stories. These aren't just ordinary stories. They're filled with meaningful life lessons that can inspire, teach, and stay with you long after the video ends. Hit that subscribe button and join our growing community. The story begins. In the music classroom at Lycée Saint-Éloi, I felt that familiar tingling sensation creeping into my fingertips, a warning I had learned to recognize over years of living with epilepsy. My heart tightened as the electric buzz spread up through my hands, a silent alarm echoing in my skull. I knew a seizure was coming, and fast. "Mrs. Dubois, I need to go to the nurse immediately," I said, my voice trembling as the sensation surged through my brain like tiny shocks of lightning. My words seemed small, fragile, almost pleading. But Mrs. Dubois, a middle-aged teacher with sharp, piercing eyes and a smile that never reached them, only let out a derisive chuckle. "Oh, another student claiming to have a trendy disease? Epilepsy is in fashion now, is it?" She sneered, tilting her head as if my fear were some grotesque performance. I tried to explain the emergency action plan outlined in my medical record, the steps she was supposed to follow, the protocol for keeping me safe, but she cut me off abruptly. "Sit down, Katie. Stop the theatrics," she said, her voice smooth, cold, almost clinical in its cruelty. Panic clawed at my chest as the tingling sensation shot up my arms. I had no more than 2 minutes before consciousness would betray me. My vision blurred at the edges, and the hum of the classroom became distorted, turning into a low, menacing drone. Sophie, my best friend, 16 years old like me, leapt from her seat. She ran toward the emergency button near the door, her face pale but resolute. "She's not faking it. I've seen Katie have a seizure before." But Mrs. Dubois intercepted her with a swiftness that left me frozen, her hand pinning Sophie in place. Her voice dripped with sarcasm. "The only thing seizing here is her need for attention," she said, glancing at me with a mixture of disdain and amusement. Then she did something I would never forget. With deliberate calm, she pulled the key from her pocket, locking the classroom door with a quiet click that reverberated through my chest. She tucked the key into the pocket of her wool coat and announced to the room with a sense of twisted triumph, "No one leaves until she admits she's faking." This victim mentality is destroying a generation. Time slowed. The walls of the classroom seemed to close in around me. The smell of old sheet music and varnished was suddenly suffocating. I felt the first wave of the seizure hit, muscles tensing uncontrollably, limbs jerking beyond my control. Panic mixed with shame, and my mind screamed for help that wasn't coming. My classmates' faces blurred into anxious shadows, the piano keys gleaming like distant islands I could never reach. And all the while, Mrs. Dubois stood at the front, her arms crossed, eyes cold and unwavering, a figure of authority turned tormentor. I realized in that terrifying moment that the calm, orderly life I had known was gone. The room, the music, the sunlight filtering through the tall windows, all of it became part of a storm I had no choice but to survive. The nightmare reached its peak. Classroom at Lycée Saint-Éloi, once filled with the sound of hesitant scales and quiet laughter, erupted into chaos. Desks screeched across the floor. A girl at the back screamed, her voice sharp and thin like glass shattering. "Call 112!" Her words cracked through the air, but before anyone could move, Mrs. Dubois lunged toward the box where students left their phones during class. She yanked it off the shelf with a thud, clutching it like a weapon. "Hand over every phone right now or the entire class is suspended," she barked, her eyes glittering with a strange, almost triumphant fury. The threat silenced the room for a heartbeat. I could hear only the roaring in my own ears and the ragged rhythm of my breath as my vision blurred. The edges of the classroom dissolved into streaks of color and light, smearing together like wet paint. Somewhere through the haze, I heard a voice I recognized too well. "She's been faking since she was a kid. Grandma told me she just wants attention." Lucas, my cousin 17, my occasional rival, sometimes my enemy, spat the words like poison. Each syllable cut deeper than the last, slicing through my chest in a way the seizure couldn't. I wanted to protest, to tell him he was wrong, that I'd never chosen any of this. But my lips wouldn't move, my tongue felt like stone. Mrs. Dubois straightened up, emboldened by his accusation. Her mouth curled into a smile that wasn't a smile at all. Without warning, she spun toward the smartboard at the front of the room, her fingers flying across the touchscreen. A YouTube search bar appeared, and then, like a nightmare conjured out of nowhere, she pulled up a video titled "Strobe Light Challenge 12 Hours." "This," she declared, turning the volume up until the tinny speakers hissed, "is exposure therapy." With a flick of her wrist, she raised the brightness to its maximum setting. White, black, the screen exploded into flickering madness. The flashing lights stabbed into my skull like 1,000 knives. My stomach lurched. Sophie's voice tore through the air, raw and panicked. "Turn it off! Photosensitive epilepsy is real." But Mrs. Dubois only shrugged, her tone casual, as if we were discussing the weather. "It's psychosomatic. She thinks she's having a seizure, so her body performs one." A sudden crash, then a strangled cry. Adrien, a quiet 16-year-old who usually sat alone by the window, crumpled to the floor, clutching his head. His limbs jerked violently. He hadn't been diagnosed, but the lights had found him too. The room became a kind of hell. Chairs toppled. Someone vomited. Another student crawled under a desk, sobbing. Sophie tried to shield my eyes with her hands, but the flashes had already seeped in, carving their way through my vision. My body betrayed me. My knees buckled. I collapsed, the floor rising up hard and cold against my cheek. My muscles convulsed, violent, unstoppable. Pain shot through me as my jaw clenched, then something wet and coppery filled my mouth. Blood. I had bitten my tongue. Through the murky fog of my mind, sounds blurred into a distant, disjointed soundtrack. Sophie screaming my name, someone praying under their breath, desks scraping as kids tried to hide. And then, absurdly, the slow, deliberate crunch of chocolate. I forced my eyes open just enough to see her, Mrs. Dubois, leaning back against the piano, calmly chewing a chocolate bar, muttering to herself, "Such impressive acting." The fake blood's a bit over the top, though. Her indifference felt colder than the tile beneath me. Étienne, a gentle boy who had never raised his voice in class, snapped. He grabbed a metal music stand with both hands, his face twisted with rage, and hurled it at the smartboard. The screen shattered with a high-pitched crack, sparks fizzing before the image went black. "Vandalism!" Mrs. Dubois shrieked, whipping out her phone to record. her tone suddenly more outraged at broken property than at convulsing students. Étienne turned, eyes wild, and slammed the stand into the window. Glass rained down like sharp rain, scattering across the floor. Adrien was still seizing a few meters away, his body curled and rigid, while Claire at the back of the room gagged and retched from the sensory assault. Through the jagged hole in the window, Mr. Laurent, the teacher from the neighboring classroom, peeked in. His brow furrowed for a moment, but before he could speak, Mrs. Dubois yanked the curtain closed with a quick, practiced movement and flashed him a thumbs up, her smile a grotesque mask of reassurance. He hesitated, then walked away, unsuspecting. My seizure surged. This one was unlike any I had known before, longer, deeper, as if it were tearing pieces of me loose. My lungs seized. The air refused to enter. My vision narrowed to a pinprick of light. Later, Sophie would tell me my lips had turned blue, that I had stopped breathing entirely, my small frame jerking like a puppet with cut strings. "She's dying," Sophie screamed, her voice breaking, trying to roll me onto my side. Her hands shook, but she remembered the training, tilting my head to clear my airway. Around her, the classroom dissolved into a war zone of panic and glass. Étienne lunged at Mrs. Dubois as she tried to push Sophie away. He held her by the arms, shouting at her to stop, while Sophie pressed her ear to my chest, searching for a heartbeat. Then, through the chaos, another figure appeared, Julien. My boyfriend, 17, had been walking past the hall when he heard the commotion. Through the shattered window, he saw me convulsing on the floor, my body limp and alien. His eyes went wide. "Katie!" He pounded on the door, again and again, fists splitting open against the locked handle. Blood smeared across the wood. Finally, with a wrenching scream, he forced it open just as a group of teachers from the adjacent classrooms poured in, their faces pale. Someone dialed 112. Someone else knelt beside Adrien. I remember nothing of what happened next. My world had already dissolved into darkness. Later, I would be told I went into cardiac arrest. 90 seconds without a pulse, long enough for the room to hold its breath, for Sophie to think I was gone. They performed CPR there on the classroom floor while my classmates sobbed and pressed themselves into corners, their faces white as chalk. Adrien never regained consciousness. He died just outside the classroom in the hallway while paramedics tried and failed to bring him back. His sneakers left faint streaks of blood across the tiles as they carried him away. I lived. But as they lifted me onto the stretcher, a mask over my face, I caught one last image through the blur. Sophie clutching my hand, her cheeks streaked with tears, Étienne shaking, his knuckles raw, and Mrs. Dubois standing in the doorway, her expression unreadable, her phone still in her hand as if she were documenting a show she had staged. The music room was silent then. No notes, no laughter, no lessons. Just broken glass, the faint scent of blood and chocolate, and a memory that would never stop flickering in my mind like the strobe light that had nearly killed me. The aftermath settled over Lycée Saint-Éloi like a heavy, suffocating fog. Mrs. Dubois had been placed on paid leave while the school claimed to investigate, her absence leaving an eerie void in the halls. The chaos she had sown didn't simply disappear. It lingered, a stain on every corner of the music classroom, every memory of that day. Adrien's parents were struggling to cover the mounting medical bills he had accrued before his tragic death. Costs totaled 150,000 euros, but their appeals and community donations barely scraped together 40,000. I could feel their despair radiating even through my own trauma, and it fueled a fire in me I hadn't realized I had. I wasn't alone. Sophie, Étienne, and Malik, our classmate with a passion for technology, joined me in the silent agreement. We would not let this be buried. We became investigators, vigilantes armed with courage and determination. We started gathering evidence, combing through anything that could expose the truth. Old blog posts from Mrs. Dubois surfaced, cruelly mocking students with disabilities under the guise of humor. Malik helped us pull security footage from the hallway outside the music classroom, which clearly showed Mrs. Dubois standing still, observing while we fought against the seizure with no intervention. But the school responded as institutions often do, with threats and intimidation. Letters arrived from the teachers' union, warning us against defamation if we spoke her name. Suspensions loomed over our heads like storm clouds. Some classmates distanced themselves, whispering that I was drama-prone or a girl who liked attention. Lucas, of course, was relentless. He uploaded an old video from a family party, editing it with captions that mocked my seizure, claiming I faked it for attention. The video went viral among students, comments dripping with cruelty. My phone buzzed relentlessly, each notification another jab at my dignity. Even Julian, my boyfriend, began to pull away. Initially supportive, he was swayed by the warnings of his basketball coach, concerned that his association with our fight could jeopardize his college scholarship. He lingered on the edge of our circle, torn between love and fear, while I felt the sting of his absence like another invisible blow. Yet we persisted. We contacted Claire Moreau, a local attorney known for taking cases involving children and education. Claire agreed to help pro bono, a lifeline amidst the storm. She guided us meticulously, teaching us how to gather admissible evidence, witness statements, system logs from the smartboard proving the video had been activated, even notes from the paramedics who had responded to our calls. One of the EMTs, who had been present during my seizure, agreed to testify if summoned. The school, unsurprisingly, attempted to bury everything. An offer appeared on my desk, 60,000 euros to sign a non-disclosure agreement. The money was tantalizing. It could have covered Adrien's medical bills, repaired shattered windows, and paid for months of therapy, but I refused. Sophie, Étienne, and Malik also declined the same bribe-like offers. There would be no compromise. Determined to make a statement, we organized a silent protest on the school grounds. Despite a formal ban from Madame Lefebvre, the principal, dozens of students joined, forming a circle on the main courtyard. We held candles in memory of Adrien, their flickering flames small defiance against the institution that had failed him. Even when we were threatened with detention after school, we refused to disperse. The silence of our protest spoke louder than words ever could, resonating with the quiet outrage that had been simmering in the student body. Then, a small miracle, a USB stick appeared mysteriously in my locker. Contents were unmistakable. A hallway surveillance video, far clearer than the first, capturing the raw indifference of Mrs. Dubois as the seizure unfolded. Every second, every gesture, or lack thereof, was documented. Claire analyzed it and confirmed its significance. "This is pivotal," she said, "but it must remain confidential. Any leak before we file could compromise the case." Holding the USB, I felt a mixture of relief and responsibility. It wasn't just about vindicating me anymore. It was about Adrien, about every student who had been silenced, dismissed, or humiliated. The weight of that truth settled on my shoulders, but it wasn't crushing. It was empowering. Sophie squeezed my hand, Étienne's jaw was set in quiet determination, and Malik's fingers itched over his laptop, ready to back up every bite of evidence. We were no longer victims. We were strategists, warriors in a battle that demanded patience, precision, and courage. The days that followed were a blur of whispered conversations, coded emails, and clandestine meetings in empty classrooms. Each of us contributed in our own way. Malik hacking the smartboard logs, Étienne documenting every verbal threat and every suspicious action by the administration, Sophie keeping me grounded when the anxiety threatened to overwhelm. I kept a journal, chronicling every detail, every insult, every flash of cruelty from Lucas, every smirk from Mrs. Dubois that had haunted my nightmares. Pressure mounted. The school board attempted to settle, offering minor disciplinary actions that barely scratched the surface. Parents argued, students turned away, and yet our small coalition refused to buckle. Claire coached us on the legal mechanics, ensuring we stayed within the bounds of the law while exposing the truth. Each discovery, each scrap of evidence, was a small victory, a reminder that the system could be challenged, that voices could matter even when the odds seemed insurmountable. At night, I would replay the events in my mind, the flickering lights, the smell of blood, the sounds of panicked classmates. And yet, alongside the horror, there was hope. Hope that justice could be pursued, that change was possible, that Adrien's memory could inspire a reckoning. The USB in my hand wasn't just evidence. It was a torch, a lifeline to truth, a promise that silence would no longer be an option. As the weeks stretched on, the fight continued. Not with violence, not with anger, but with perseverance, courage, and unwavering resolve. We had become more than friends. We were a unit bound by trauma, by shared outrage, and by the belief that standing for what was right mattered more than fear. Every email sent, every protest held, every blog post documented was a battle in a war we had chosen, a war we would not lose. Even with threats, social ostracism, and moments of despair, our mission was clear: expose the cruelty, vindicate the victims, and ensure that no other student would ever endure what Adrien, I, or anyone else had suffered. And as we continued to gather evidence, guided by Claire's steady hand, I realized something vital. Courage is contagious, and sometimes the smallest voices, when united, can shake even the most formidable institutions to their core. It was late, and the room was bathed in the soft amber glow of a desk lamp. I was sitting cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by an almost chaotic sprawl of medical records, prescriptions, and notes from the paramedics. Past months had been exhausting, not just physically, but emotionally. Every appointment, every log of my seizures, every detail of Adrien's tragic incident replayed in my mind as I meticulously organized the papers. Felt like the only way I could impose some order on the chaos that had upended my life. Malik leaned over my shoulder, his laptop humming softly, fingers poised like a pianist about to strike a chord. His usually calm expression was tense, eyes scanning a screen that made my stomach knot. "Katie, you need to see this," he said, voice low, urgent. My heart skipped. He pointed to a browser window that made my blood run cold. An anonymous account had uploaded my entire medical file online. My epilepsy history, medications, emergency action plan, even the confidential notes from doctors and hospital visits. It was a complete violation of privacy laws, a betrayal I couldn't have imagined, even in my worst fears. I felt panic surge through me, but beneath it, a spark of determination flared. I grabbed my phone, turned on the camera, and began recording. My hand shook, but my voice remained firm. I told the world everything: the events in the music classroom, the negligence of Mrs. Dubois, the suffering Adrien had endured, the danger she had deliberately created. I spoke not just for myself, but for Adrien, for the students who had been silenced, for anyone who had been dismissed or hurt by the indifference of authority. Posted the video on social media and then waited. Within hours, the response was overwhelming. Comments, shares, and messages flooded in. People were listening. And soon, Pierre Dubois, a local journalist who was not related to Mrs. Dubois, contacted me. His investigation unearthed a horrifying pattern. Mrs. Dubois had a history of endangering students. A child with type 1 diabetes had been locked in a room during a severe episode, labeled as learning responsibility. The story ignited the community. Parents, students, and local organizations demanded accountability. Police opened an official investigation, interviewing 23 students who had witnessed the events firsthand. Each testimony reinforced the nightmare we had lived through, painting a clear picture of negligence and abuse. As the investigation unfolded, I discovered something that made my blood run cold. Mrs. Dubois had connections with a conservative group of educators who had attended a seminar in Lyon on fighting victim culture. Her carefully maintained blog revealed her intentions. She had planned to teach students a lesson by placing us in dangerous situations. It was deliberate. My stomach churned with the realization that the chaos in the classroom had not been a fluke or misjudgment, it had been a calculated act. The legal and institutional battles were grueling. Court mandated that every teacher at Lycée Saint-Éloi complete comprehensive epilepsy response training within 30 days. Immediate termination of Mrs. Dubois was denied due to legal procedural requirements, a frustrating technicality that left many parents and students simmering with anger. The district did establish a €250,000 memorial fund in Adrien's name to support epilepsy research, and Mrs. Dubois eventually resigned. Her teaching license was placed under review, a small consolation against the pain she had caused. Personally, the ordeal left its mark. My epilepsy threshold had dropped due to the sustained stress, forcing me to increase my medication dosage. Julian, my boyfriend, drifted away, prioritizing his college scholarship over standing by me. The loss was painful, but it also strengthened my resolve. I realized that I could no longer wait for others to protect students like Adrien or myself. I had to take action myself. With Sophie, Étienne, and Malik by my side, I founded a disability advocacy group at school. 25 students joined, drawn by shared experiences or by the desire to prevent similar tragedies. We began proposing practical policies to support students with medical conditions, presenting them to the school board and demanding actionable change. Our voices, once small and overlooked, became instruments of reform. We were no longer simply reacting to injustice, we were actively shaping the system from within. On one crisp Saturday morning, I visited Adrien's grave with his mother, Camille. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. We simply sat together, the cold morning air brushing against our skin, the words engraved on the headstone catching the faint sunlight. The light never truly fades, it merely transforms. I placed a small bouquet of wildflowers beside the stone. The moment was quiet yet powerful. It was a reminder that memory could be a source of strength, that grief could coexist with resilience. Later, I wrote an article for the local newspaper calling for systemic changes in education. I urged schools to implement transparent policies, comprehensive emergency training, and a culture of accountability. I emphasized that mistakes should not be hidden, that protecting students was far more important than preserving reputations. The article was widely shared, sparking conversations far beyond our small town. It was a small but meaningful victory, proof that truth and persistence could influence the larger world. Though justice arrived late and Adrien could never return, I learned to carry the pain without letting it consume me. I learned that trauma and loss could coexist with hope, and that resilience could be cultivated even in the most trying circumstances. Adrien's memory became a compass guiding our advocacy. Each policy proposal, each meeting with the school board, each article published a tribute to him. From this experience, I drew 5 lessons that continue to shape me. 1. Speak up even when fear whispers silence. Fear is paralyzing, but truth has momentum. Choosing to speak, even when vulnerable, ignites change. Silence protects no one. 2. Solidarity multiplies strength. Sophie, Étienne, Malik, and I were individuals, but together we became a force. Collective courage can challenge even entrenched systems. 3. Persistence reshapes institutions. Bureaucracies often prioritize reputation over safety. Consistent advocacy, careful documentation, and unwavering persistence can force transparency and reform. 4. Transform personal pain into purpose. Adrien's death was heartbreaking, yet it became a catalyst for action. Pain, channeled into meaningful advocacy, honors those lost and prevents future harm. 5. Courage without strategy is fragile. Courage with direction can save lives. Evidence, documentation, and legal guidance were essential. Thoughtful action amplifies courage into tangible change. Our story reminds us that apathy and prejudice can be deadly, but resilience, collective action, and courage can transform even the darkest situations. Adrien's legacy lives on in every student we protect, in every policy enacted, and in every voice that refuses to remain silent. If this story has touched you, share it. Like, comment, and subscribe to our channel so others can learn that speaking up matters, that solidarity is essential, and that change is possible when we refuse to look away. Together, we can ensure that no student suffers in silence and that the light Adrien left behind continues to illuminate the world. Even in grief, even in loss, there is power. Even in despair, there is hope. And even when the world seems indifferent, deliberate, courageous action can change lives forever.